Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining me today on our live. We will make sure that we are getting online everywhere. I'm Jamie from Galápagos Shark Diving. Thank you for joining, and let me know where you're tuning on. Let me see that the comment section is working. So send me maybe where you're tuning in from or where you are at the moment, and I will see if all the comments and live sections are working. I am right now, as you can see, streaming in from beautiful Costa Rica. Nice and cream behind me. So let me know where you are from, or when you are not where you're from, but where you're tuning in from, while I'm making sure that everything works. Let's see. That works. Comment. Just making sure I see all the comments for our live session afterwards, because it would be a pity if I cannot see the comments. That works, and as you can see, I'm already pinning the possibility of a Zoom. So we have after the topic, after the live Q&A, so you can ask all your questions that you might have. And after that, I'm offering a Zoom, because every time I'm on land, I have a little bit more time. So if you're fancying a little bit more personal advice or want to just chat about Galapagos, feel free to join the Zoom. But otherwise, you can already, start putting in questions in the comments if they're coming already up. I just will have one more check on where do I have the comments. You see, I'm not doing that very often. I'm not very good in multitasking just yet. Okay, in YouTube, I do not find the possibility to post right now. Live chat, let's see if that works. Yeah, there we go. Found it and posted, and I do see this comment as well. Perfect. So that means, let me know where you're from. US, Wisconsin. Thank you, John. I do see comments from Facebook, from YouTube, as well as Instagram, I think. Yes. Instagram, nobody told me yet where you're from. Amazon. Well, that's very good. Hey, Ron. Thanks for joining. Perfect. So I do see everything. So let's dive in directly. I'm Jenny. I'm from Galápagos Shark Diving. I am now working since over 10 years in the Galapagos and shark research, but also in diving. So I get often questions like, what's the best dive season, that we answered last week. But this second question is, how cold does it get? Many divers here horror stories about the Galápagos Islands, because obviously the best dive season is June to October, when the temperature are a little bit lower, because we do have the cold Humboldt current, we have the cold Grumble current, which are necessary to have that much wildlife, as I talked about last time, because they do bring a lot of nutrients in. But what does it mean? Is Galapagos really that cold? People then ask me, do I bring a tri-suit? How many millimeters do I need? So let's go into the different regions, because to the fact you have so many different currents, you have suddenly an area of the Galapagos Islands which has up to 5 different bioregions. And by bioregions, I mean not only air, but also water temperature. And they really differ a lot. So you have obviously the central islands of Santa Cruz, San Cristobal, the eastern side of Isabela. You'd have the northern part with Magena and so on. And you have the far north, Wolf and Darwin, what obviously is the goal for many, many divers. And then you have the west sides, so the western side of Isabela, where you have two, basically one bigger area of bioregion and one smaller one between Fernandina and Isabela in the south. And all of those have different water temperatures. So it's always very hard when I get the question, how do I pack, for the different temperatures, but we get to that a little bit later. Let's concentrate on 3 of those bioregions. Why 3? Because those 3 are the ones where you have your dive sites. So most of the dive liveaboards, doesn't matter if you're traveling with us or if you're traveling with any other dive liveaboard, they concentrate usually like 2-3 days in the Central Islands. You have up to 3-4 days sometimes up in north in Wolf and Darwin. And then you have 1 day in the cold side of Isabela. So let's start maybe in the warm, nice north. So last week in the live, I talked about the equatorial front, and the equatorial front is moving. So it's a boundary of different water masses meeting, and the northern part with Wolf and Darwin is usually above the equatorial front. As I said, it's always moving, so it can obviously vary, but let's talk about average temperatures so you get an idea of the different temperatures. So up in the north, you have usually 22 to 26 degrees. So let's say 24 degrees Celsius as an average temperature. So that is 72 to 79 Fahrenheit. So 24 as an average would be 75 Fahrenheit. So that is the average temperature that you can expect as a water temperature in the cold season. So between June and October, so that is the time that I'm focusing on right now, that is your average temperature. And I would say, well, that's quite nice. That's very pleasant. And as I said, most of the dive liveaboards spending 3 days minimum up there, because that is where you want to dive. That is where you have the whale sharks, the hammerhead schools, the Galápagos sharks, the rays, the eagle rays, the fur seals, there's just so much life. I mean, that's the big life. When you then turn around and would look into the reef, it's even more, all the tropical fish. And that's also the reason why there is tropical fish, because it's nice and warm up there. So average temperature 24 degrees Celsius or 75 degrees Fahrenheit. So quite nice. And remember, out of your 8 days of diving or 7 days of diving that you have on each liveaboard, 3 of them is minimum in those warm waters. Then you have your check dive as well as 1 or 2 other dives, usually dive days in the Central Islands, so around Santa Cruz or San Cristobal, depending where you starting from, Santiago Island. And the average temperature, I would say, is around 20 degrees, so 90 to 20 degrees Celsius, which is 66 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit. So you say, that's already getting a little bit cold. And there is already where you feel the Humboldt current. So the really cold current originating from Antarctica, the Humboldt current is hitting obviously the Central Islands a little bit, and there you feel the influence. So it can get colder when the Humboldt is stronger, it can get much warmer if the Humboldt is not as strong. So that is the average temperature, I would say 20 degrees Celsius around those areas like Cousins Rock, the eastern side of Isabela. Most of the day diving basically trips are that temperature, again in the cold season. So that is really, really nice. So that is also from your 7 days, around 2 days. And then the cold area, the west side of Fernandina, from Isabela, Fernandina, the area which has the crumble current. So that is where the crumble current, a very, very deep current, comes to the island, hits the island, and does upwelling, which means you have not only colder temperatures, but you also have thermocline. So on the western side, it's often better to talk about in different layers. On the surface, average temperature, I would say, is around 18, 19 degrees Celsius, which is 64 to 66 Fahrenheit. So you said that's not that bad. But in order to then get down where you can see molas, where you can see, the beauty of the dive place, you often go through the thermocline. And below the thermocline, it usually can get quite chilly. So I would say usually the last years it was around 14 degrees Celsius, which is 57 degrees Fahrenheit. So it is quite chilly. But imagine again, it is 1 day out of your 7 days of diving in the islands, if you're doing a regular 8-day liveaboard. Out of those 2 to 3 dives, most of the ships are offering on that side. You have one where you have really colder waters, where you want to see the molas, the sunfish, which is quite amazing, where you have the chance to see penguins, sea lions. The wall in Ponte Vicente Roca alone, the invertebrates, is just gigantic. It's incredible. It's one cold dive, and the second cold dive that you do is usually with the marine iguanas. So when you're closer to Fernandina, you have the biggest marine iguana populations in the islands. So it's really worth going there. And there your dive is usually in the first 5 meters. So the marine iguana dive means you're still in the really nice warm water. So it's not that cold, right? So looking together of the different temperatures. So remember, up in the north, quite warm with around 24 degrees Celsius, which is 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Then you have the central islands, average temperature, I would say 20 degrees, which is 68 degrees Fahrenheit. And then you have the cold, where you have on the surface, let's say 18 to 19, which is 64 to 66 Fahrenheit. And then below the thermocline, probably an average of 14 degrees Celsius, which is 57 degrees Fahrenheit. And the cold area, you're one single day out of 7. So coming now back to the question, which then many divers had, what do I wear? Personally, I think everyone is usually fine with a 7mm wetsuit. As I said, most of your dives will be in warmer water, even if it is the cold season or considered the cold season. I wouldn't go any lower than 7mm or semi-dry, which a lot of people that coming to the islands prefer semi-dry 7mm because it keeps you drier inside, not dry because it is a semi-dry, but it has less water movement, so the water that's inside the wetsuit stays warmer, which usually is fine, because you have to keep in mind also it's 7 days of diving, which means that you have your body cooling out much faster. So even up in 24 degrees Celsius, it's usually fine if you dive a day or 2, but keep in mind it's up to 4 dives a day up in the north, which makes your body cooling out much faster. So even if it's 24 degrees Celsius, 75 Fahrenheit, and it seems very warm, I still would go with 7mm. On the cold side, do I have to bring a dry suit? Of course, for one day, it is much nicer to have a dry suit, to have it there, to dive with it. Also in the central islands, it's often not as much current, so it's much easier to dive with a dry suit. So if you have experience and you're willing to travel with both, then yes. But otherwise, dry suit, I personally always would recommend not to bring unless you have really a lot of experience. Because when you're coming with a dry suit, keep in mind you have to dive also with a dry suit up in the north. And there you have a lot of current. And in my last recent years, when I saw people coming with dry suit, it is challenging to dive. So if you don't have a lot of experience, don't even consider bringing it, because you will not enjoy it. You will be more focused on your dry suit and getting the air out and with it up and down with the current and so on. Because with a wetsuit, you don't feel it, but with a dry suit, you will feel the current, and it will be a little bit more, takes a little bit longer to adjust to the conditions. Let's say it like this. So I personally would not recommend diving up in the north with the dry suit. You're much slower, which means when we have whale sharks and you want to spend time with a whale shark, it's not the best. So I personally never dived with a dry suit up in Darwin. I did cheat a little bit when we had colder times in Wolf to go with a dry suit, but usually I'm always diving with wetsuit up in the north, and then I having a dry suit down in the central island and western island. But I do usually dive up to 8, 9, 10 weeks in a row, which then means obviously my body is cooling out much faster. For 1 week, I personally don't think you need a dry suit. A semi-dry 7mm is usually more than sufficient. If you're really afraid of the cold, so of the one day where you have a cold day, then bring your dry suit if you want it, but also inform the ship or us when you're traveling with us to have a wetsuit in case you want to change to it. Because what happened, I'm not quite sure if it was 2 or 3 years ago now. I think it was 3 years ago. We had a diver who had, for the first dive, or for the second dive, I think he put his dry suit on for one dive, and then I think he didn't touch it again for the rest of the cruise. But it's much easier, obviously, if you have to something to change into. So always keep in mind, dry suit diving is not always the easiest. If you're coming from a lot of wetsuit diving, dry suit might be a little bit difficult. So to summarize, different areas, different temperature, very warm up in the north, average temperature in the Central Islands, quite cold in the western side, but it's only 1 day out of 7 where you spend on the western side. Does it make sense to go to the western side even if it's cold? Yes. I mean, when you see your first mola or your first marine iguana, oh my gosh. I mean, I personally, probably with the marine iguana dive, you get me out of the water maybe after an hour, not before, because it's just so much fun to see them munching away the algae and the damselfish trying to chase them off. And it's just, yeah, there's so much happening, so much life underwater. So yeah, it is definitely worth it. So I think that would be already more or less what I wanted to talk about. So please give me your questions if you do have any questions afterwards. Let's see. No, so far. Either I answered all your questions or you don't have any yet. So I will wait a little bit. As I said, if you're also, if you're shy or if you don't, want to have a little bit of personal question and time and want to ask me questions about Galapagos or your personal feeling, because obviously those temperature will feel different to someone, living in Costa Rica or living in Canada, where you used maybe to much colder current temperature. So John, how about warmer season late next month? Yes, so the temperature will be much warmer around the Central Islands, around the Northern Islands, as well as the Western side. However, you will see much less wildlife. You still will see the marine iguanas. You will see still hammerheads this season, for example. So if you're considering to go this year, we do have unusual cold currents right now. So we do see still a lot of wildlife because the nutrients are still in the water. But generally speaking, if you have a normal warm season, so January to May, it is much warmer. So the water temperature is much warmer, but warmer temperature, also keep in mind, are less nutrients, are less food in the water, and are less animals. So again, you still see hammerheads, but you might not see the big schools of hammerheads that you hope to see when you're coming to the Galapagos, or whale sharks. Also, we do still have, for some reason, this year is really weird. As I said, it's quite cold still when you look at the sea surface temperature at this moment. So that is also something that you can check. So if you're really interested into those topics, just Google sea surface temperature, and then you have NOAA coming up. And there you actually see the Pacific, so the Southern Pacific, and Eastern Pacific zone with Galapagos, and there you see the different currents coming in. I wish I could show a chart here, but I don't think I actually can do that live. But yeah, maybe I put it later into the in the comments to see how is it right now, just for you to see the differences in sea surface temperatures. Thank you, John. John, how about 5mm wetsuit and 5mm hood with integrated 5mm torso? For the warm season, you probably get away with it. However, as I already said, you're diving 7 days non-stop, so your body will cool out. Experience-wise, usually men are fine with a 5mm wetsuit. Women tend to get much colder after day 3 of diving, especially because most of the dive liver goats go first up to the north, have the hammerhead diving, sometimes whale shark depending on the season, and then they're going down to the western cold side, which then feels much colder. So I personally still would recommend go with a 7mm. If you hate 7mm, then you probably will be fine with a 5mm suit. And then you have the hood for the colder area. So hood up in the north, you probably won't need. That's another thing. The hood I probably would only recommend in the Central Islands as well as on the colder side, because if you keep your head warm, for everyone that gets cold very fast, if your head is warm, your whole body will feel much warmer. So you keep your heat inside. So when you're getting cold, that is something to put on first. So let's see. So also, John, if you have any questions about different liveaboards, different ships, you're not decided yet where to go, with which ships to go, I'm happily giving you advice which ships are safe, which ones are good, what are the advantages in terms of itinerary or disadvantages. So just shoot me a message if you like. So gloves. Yes, so in the Galapagos, indeed, it is recommended diving with gloves. Because we do hold on to lava rocks from time to time, especially when we have currents up in the north. We're holding on to rocks. However, I please would recommend to you to always watch where you're putting your hands as well as your fins, because often we have a lot of stone corals up in the north, especially, and to not hold on to corals. So please, please, please be very careful when you do so. But yes, it is recommended to having gloves, not as much for the cold, but more holding onto the reef and to the stones, to the lava stones. So yes, gloves are recommended. However, not very thick gloves, because as I said, it's not much for the cold. So you can have one pair of very thick ones like you have for the Fernandina Isabela dive the one day, but then also bring maybe garden gloves, which are just protecting your hands. Because sometimes you have a couple of barnacles that are on the rocks. So it is definitely recommended to, maybe just garden gloves. That is usually the easiest, not very expensive, and really does the work of protecting your fingers when you're holding on. So what we have here, how about orca whales? They scare me and have seen videos of them in the Galapagos. Yes, Sam, we do have a lot of orcas around. Usually it's more on the western side of Isabella where we sight them. The last months, actually, we had a lot of sighting of orcas, not as much in the north. So where we have the sharks, we actually do not want to have orcas as much, because when orcas are around, the sharks are just go away. They're not staying around, which is a pity, because most of the divers obviously are coming to see the hammerheads, to see the Galapagos sharks, and they usually are scared, obviously, by the orcas. I personally find orcas fascinating, just to realize how intelligent those are, and they usually do not interact at all with us divers, which is a little bit to my disappointment, to be quite honest. From what I read with you, it's not to your disappointment, but they don't usually interact at all with the divers. So we rarely see them underwater. We see them on the surface quite often. When we are not very often, sorry, on the western side, we see them more often on the surface, but under diving, I personally did not see yet an orca in the Galapagos underwater. I was very fortunate enough to see one humpback whale last season in the Galapagos, actually up in Darwin. So Galapagos always surprises. But yeah, orcas, I did not have the pleasure yet to see them underwater in the Galapagos. I saw them in other places. But yeah, they are very fascinating creatures. And I don't think that we need to have any fear for them. Respect, yes, but it's the same with sharks, I would say. Respect is always good, but fear not. But we do see them around. So let's see how many more minutes. We have 7 more minutes. If you do have more questions, happy to answer. But I also, as you saw my last video, I will try to answer all the questions that are coming in. As I'm doing my social media at the moment alone, bear with me if the answer sometimes takes a little bit longer. Also, don't be afraid to just shoot me a personal message onto Galapagos Shark Diving. I will always answer as fast as I can, which might take a day or two from time to time. So yeah, let me see. For everyone who's just joined, we were talked about, and I will put this live video again online. So for everyone that didn't manage to join, to rewatch it and to ask questions afterwards as well. So I don't see any questions just yet. Then it's very good time to just transfer 2 things. One thing will be the Zoom in roughly 15 minutes. So at 11:45, I will offer a personal Zoom. So if you coming in just to ask me questions, if you want to talk about Galapagos, it's your time. It's when I'm on land, I'm often try to offer the possibility for anyone that is planning Galapagos or just wanted to start having some information. Feel free to join. Otherwise, I will try for the next couple of weeks or few weeks to make a live every Sunday, same time. So if you have certain questions, please feel free to put it also in the comments, kind of a wish list of questions that I should answer or talk about. I'm happy to do so. Next week, I will talk about the conditions. So a little bit, I have the feeling that a lot of people are afraid of the conditions that can be in the Galapagos Islands. And I would like to talk a little bit about the different regions, how the currents are, what you can expect, and how to prepare, how do we, adjust our dive plans to it, and if it is really that bad that everyone is talking about, which, it's all about adjusting dive planning. But I will talk about that more in detail next Sunday. And if you want to join that for that as well, it would be a pleasure. So let's have a look. I hope I can visit this beautiful place once in my life. Yes. Triple B. Yes, I hope you can, because Galapagos is indeed one of those places that it's very hard to beat. It's to the fact that you have so many different currents, you have different dive holidays in one place. You have the warm areas up in the north with all the sharks, the rays, the fur seals, the so much tropical fish, and just the big schools. When you see the big schools of tunas, when we see them, the yellowfin tuna, the big eye jacks, and it's just there's so much life. And often you sit there and you hold on, even if you have stronger currents, you're holding on. And it's just like cinema, the sharks are streaming by, and I did dive in different places, but Galapagos is always surprising me. So every season there's something where I say, oh my God. I mean, last season for me personally, it was the humpback whale underwater, and she was just so curious. So she came past us, came back, swam through the group, and it's just, it was interesting to see how much spatial awareness they do have. I mean, they're huge, and yeah, Galapagos is incredible. I mean, and I hate the cold. I mean, talking about temperature, I really do hate the cold, and I just invested 2-3 years ago in the dry suit, so I always dived with 7mm and was okay. But the cold area was indeed a challenge for me, because when you dive like 9-8 weeks in a row, your body is very cold, and it's so worth it. I mean, the marine iguanas, believe me, it's just so much fun to see them underwater feeding, and the sunfish. I mean, I think I personally cannot get enough of the sunfish. I love that. They're coming. More questions. Sorry, got carried away. Definitely interested in hearing about the extreme currents. Perfect, Sam. I will talk about that much more in detail next Sunday. So join me for that. Or if when you don't manage to join, I will be putting the live online. Coming in 3 weeks. Yes, Annette, I know. That's so nice. I'm very excited for you. So I will give you also an update, Annette, if you like, just before you are starting to pack. What are the sea surface temperatures, what you can expect. The reportings right now is still incredible in terms of diving. So choosing the warm season is not always wrong. So the temperatures are much nicer, obviously. Also, we do have a couple of days where we had a couple of more colder currents coming in, but that also means, you might see, different animals that you might otherwise wouldn't see. So we even had reporting of whale sharks, so it's quite cool. Anyway, so really excited. So if you have questions, Annette, you just reach out and I will go back to you. Sam, July for you. Very good. So you booked already. Perfect. Yeah, July is my favorite. So July, August, September is my personal favorite months. The best condition to see the big wildlife that most of you are coming for. So let's see if we have any more questions on that. Oh, wait. Are there many washing machines? Yes and no. So Triple B, I would talk about that next season more in detail, because again, it's different in the different regions. So sometimes you do have stronger currents. We do know certain places where you also do have a washing machine, where you do have stronger currents, etc. But those we usually do not dive. But I will talk about that a little bit more in detail, especially in Wolf, for example. You have different areas where we're diving, different areas where we don't dive, and we talk about how we adjust dive plans when we do so. And there are, but I will talk a little bit more in detail why most of the times it doesn't really matter for us divers. If you have a good dive vessel with good dive guides, then they know how to dive the places and how to adjust when the currents are picking up, because it's just basically adjustment. But I will talk about that. So if you can wait, otherwise, if you cannot wait, join me in the Zoom and I will explain it to you. And then next Sunday, I will do it for everyone. So let me see, any more questions? I think that's it. That's a half an hour. That is what I usually try to keep it. If you have more questions, if you want to have a personal advisory, join me in 50 minutes in the Zoom. The link is pinned to the comments. So find the comments or up in the bio. There you have the link as well. Just basically write your name and then have a direct link to the Zoom. Doesn't cost anything. It's basically an offer from my side to take the time to chat with you. Otherwise, thank you for everyone that streamed in. Thank you for all your questions. Very happy to interact, and always very happy when questions are coming. So yeah, sending lots of love and see you next Sunday. Bye-bye.